Commissioner. It's great to sit with you. First and foremost, let me just say, it was with the help of so many people, and this is why I'm so excited to sit here today with the Commissioner, because men like him are the reason why men like me can become who I am. So I'm grateful for that. Mr. Commissioner, we've gotten to talk a little bit before today, and I have to say that I'm impressed for sure, right? You seem like a person who is really genuine and down to earth. And as a person who sits in green with you here, and I think that says a lot about the fact that you're even sitting here with me today as I sit in green, as I'm incarcerated. First of all, how did you get there? How did you get to be who you are and get to the position you're in with that philosophy? And maybe you can expound a little bit more for the people exactly what your perspective is on DOCCS.
So first, I appreciate you sitting up here with me and having this discussion today, because I think it's brave of you to be able to ask me questions on behalf of the entire population and sit down and have this dialogue in front of this audience. In terms of me, honestly, I don't think it's anything special. I believe in people, right? I got in this business 27 years ago and started with this agency as a correction officer and moved throughout my journey in the department. And it's really been about believing in people, whether it's staff or incarcerated individuals. And when I took over as commissioner, that carried through for me. And I thought it was very important that on day one, I set that tone, that people mattered, right? I sent out a message to both incarcerated as well as staff. And they were intertwined, my message, but yet different, right? To the incarcerated population, I talked about all the things that we're doing right and acknowledged the things that we're doing wrong. Because I think as a system, in order to grow, we have to acknowledge that we can do better and there's gaps and there's pathways, and also acknowledge the people that are doing the right things. And the fact of the matter is our staff do a lot of great work and our providers, but we don't reach everyone. And it's my hope to leverage people like those that have been on the stage today and so many like you across the state to reach your peers, right? Because I think that you have lived experiences that we haven't done a good job in leveraging to drive success amongst the population. And with that, I think that brings hope, right? I think hope's extremely important when you're incarcerated, to know that there's a path forward for you and that you're not defined by what got you to prison, but that there's people, your peers, that grew up just like you and had the same experiences, that have found that way, have transitioned back to communities, and that you can do it too. And if we could pull one person a day from the yard to the program area, I think we'll be a better system and eventually a better society for it.
Now, you mentioned you send messages, but there's something really unique about the way you send us messages, right? We got tablets in 2019, and you actually send us emails directly to the entire population, which I think is incredible. When we were sitting down the other day, one of the men said that he'd never met a commissioner in his life, and now he gets emails from him, excuse me. So tell us about that. Like, why do you do it? What does it mean to you?
Listen, I've always had a means to communicate with staff, and technology that we've been able to bring to the population that's continually evolved gives me the opportunity to talk to the people I serve, right? I mean, people come to prison as punishment, not for punishment, and that they should understand at the top that I believe in rehabilitation. So me having the ability to say in my words directly to the population where we're going, what we're doing, I think it's important for you to understand that as we move forward and you continued with your incarceration. And hopefully it motivates people to be involved in our programs. And we're always not going to agree. I don't always agree with my staff. I don't always agree with my executive staff. And I certainly won't always agree with my wife. She's not here, so I get to say that. But again, I think it's important for us to have the conversation, whether it's good, bad, or indifferent. And that's a mechanism that I thought was important for me to be able to do.
So more to that point, I get the emails, obviously, and they come across really heartfelt, right? Almost like you're talking to a family member about trying to help them get better. be better people, get over the traumas that we've endured throughout our lives. To a large extent, I think that prison is the epicenter of trauma in a lot of ways from our communities. We touch a lot of families that are obviously dealing with a lot of difficulty. What does it mean to you? Like, you're at the top of this system now, and you have incredible ability to help our families, us and our families, you know, get out of the ruts that we've been in our past. And like I said, these emails are really heartfelt. What is your feeling about all that?
Well, I mean, I do speak from the heart. I mean, I say what I mean what I say. And, as you point out, and as we've heard here today, a lot of people incarcerated, in fact, I would be heartfelt to find someone that wasn't impacted by trauma in their lives that are doing time in any prison system across the United States or abroad. So recognizing that we've had trauma ourselves and that we've hurt people, and to be able to evolve from that and recognize that the person that's now overseeing this agency recognizes that and the humanity in people, I think is critically important. And when we talk about families, recognizing that, and again, we've heard it here today, incarceration just doesn't impact the person that has done the crime and is being sentenced. It impacts families and generations, and to have the ability to have those familiar relationships and build bonds is critically important to me. I mean, we could talk about theory and we could talk about the statistics and the research on how it drives recidivism, which all, by the way, is something I'm really not fond of, right? In measuring failure. I'd rather talk about recidivism in talking about success. And I think as commissioner, I want to continue to allow for avenues to strengthen those bonds and not see barriers and further barriers. And I think we can do so in a variety of ways. We talk about the programs we have in New York State that you don't see around the country. I mean, one that comes to mind is Celebrate Your Children, born right here at Sing Sing Correctional Facility and is now spanned across the state, which gives an opportunity for incarcerated parents to spend time with their child outside of the presence of their caregiver, right, in the community, and have that one-on-one bond. The expansion of technology through Wi-Fi to allow for you to have more readily accessible the phone and the ability to send secure messages without getting out of your cell and connecting to a tablet to allow for you to express your feelings back and forth with family. Those things are critically important. Proximity to minor child. That law was passed a few years ago. We started implementing that early. We have about 43% of our population are incarcerated parents. 30% of those have minor children. In the first year, we moved over 1,900 people, and two facilities tie for first place, Sing Sing and Fishkill, with the most incarcerated parents at 501 incarcerated people. So family connections helps you continue to drive what you're doing inside. But also one last thing I think is immeasurable in any program or any success, and we started to touch upon it here in the various conversations, but as incarcerated people can identify that they were traumatized, that they've hurt people, and can express that they're doing better, and we can have those conversations very frankly with our kids, that when they say, I want to be like mommy or be like daddy, it's the person you are today and the person you will become, not the person that got you here. And what that does, that breaks cycles of incarceration, right? And we're never going to measure how that breaks that cycle. But I mean, you saw pictures up there and heard about, I was a trailer baby and the cycle, right? We need to find ways that we stop that from perpetuating and we can break those cycles. And those relations do that.
Appreciate that. So one of the other things that comes to mind, I'm an incarcerated father. I'm among the 501. And to a large extent, I was blessed with a great supportive family who always brought my daughter up to see me. But our kids, my daughter's 5 months old when I became incarcerated. She's 19 now. And so she's grown up with me her entire life, essentially, incarcerated. And she's had some tough times, obviously. And obviously we have tough times in here. I wonder what's your perspective on mental health and approaching, coping strategies and things like that for us and our families.
No, I think that's critically important during your period of incarceration. I think it's, as was well said, providing that type of curriculum to children in the school setting. But one program that we run and we've expanded across the state, it's now in 20 facilities, is we use a provider organization to provide parenting visitation. And it's not just visiting, it's actually a social worker sitting with the child, so they could deal and work through their struggles and the trauma of having an incarcerated parent, as well as having services on the side for the incarcerated individual. So as much as that one-on-one bonding time is critically important, making sure we're providing those wraparound services with mental health and dealing with trauma, because I think oftentimes we don't even recognize our own trauma, or that the incarceration of a loved one or a parent, the actual effect it's having. I don't care how long you've known and it's gone on your entire life, it pays a toll. So having this program with social workers that can help them cope and deal with that and allow them to express themselves, I think is critically important.
So I wonder if you have any questions for me. I'm a
Always.
bit of an expert myself in here.
I have a
Been
lot
here
of-
20 years. I mean, I've been doing this almost as long as you.
Sure. I appreciate the opportunity to ask questions. And seeing you didn't ask me any softball questions, I'm not going to ask you any other. So listen, I mean, obviously this isn't new to you in terms of what's going on in our institutions. We are on an upward trajectory of violence in our institutions. And, we could talk about all the reasons why people think it's happening and why it's not happening. But last year we had a 44% increase on incarcerated violence. We had a 14% increase on incarcerated on staff violence. So I have a very, very strong desire to turn that into a bell curve and see it go downward. So from your perspective, what's driving the violence and what am I not doing to change that curve?
Well, I would say for sure what's driving the violence is an inability to cope in a healthy way with the local traumas, right, that we're dealing with on top of the traumas that we've dealt with our entire lives and endured. So that inability to cope, and I think not having someone in the moment to talk somebody off a cliff, so to speak. You have, in this particular prison, and you probably know the number, a lot of people with degrees, right? We have the Hudson Link program, obviously, here. We have a lot of men here with behavioral science degrees. And a lot of the men go home from here and actually work in social, in the social work field. I think a solution that could work is by taking guys in here who have the knowledge. I remember taking a class with Miss Weiner on crisis intervention, right? And so we know how to do this work. If we could somehow work together, because we're on the galleries, right? We're in those moments when nobody else is around, when the officer may not be there. For those who don't know, there's usually 1 or 2 officers on the gallery at any particular time for about 60 individuals or so, give or take what prison, what gallery. So there's all kind of stuff going on that is unknown to the officer. And, where the officer can't necessarily get involved and doesn't even have any clue what's going on in terms of, the social aspect. So I think that, talking to people on the galleries who have these degrees, giving them the opportunity to use their degrees, have that sort of calcification, if you will, of identity in terms of being a person who's able to use their behavioral science degree in the behavioral field, in the behavioral space, on the ground, in the prison, and actually helping situations, de-escalate, I think would be a good idea. And then I think that, a lot about what was spoken about today in terms of being in contact with the family. You mentioned earlier that positive programming is good security. So the more programs, the better, right? From what I see in my experience, and I work for Hudson Link, and so I'm in the school building every day helping guys in the college program, and I work in other programs as well. And what you notice is, guys come to these programs and they speak about wanting to do better, right? I need to change. I want to change. I want to get in the program. Right, so the mentality and the aim is there. A lot of times the seats are not, right? So it's trying to hold over a guy till he gets into college by putting him in other programs, but there's not always seats available there either. So I think the more programs we have where we're able to help guys connect to these coping strategies, right, where they're already reaching out and trying to basically use a coping strategy by getting a positive programming to give them reason to stay out of trouble. The phone is important. You know, if I feel like I have nothing to lose and I can't talk to my daughter, and my daughter was just bawling on the phone, and the officer says, listen, it's time to get off the phone, and I can't help my daughter through what she's going through, that's going to leave me in a difficult space. And now when the officer comes by, I may give him an attitude, you know, whatever may happen, or another person in green. So I think that to a large extent, those pain points, the phone is one of the majors. I think if we can take care of that, and I know you're working on that as well, I think if we can take care of that, to a large extent, that helps. What Mr. Crawford spoke about earlier with the FRP program. Sometimes, you know, our pasts haunt us on and on and on, and because you did something when you were, you know, 23 in Clinton, and now you're 37 in Sing Sing, they're still using what you did at 23 to a large extent to stop you from having these family reunion program visits. And so I think that giving guys the ability, like just like we have the time allowance committee where a guy can do some programming and get back lost of time, maybe we can get some programming where guys can get back these things that they've lost and reconnect with their families and things like that. I think that'll help a lot.
I truly appreciate that perspective. It actually gives me clarity, because a lot of the things that you spoke about are things I talk to my executive staff, and when I'm in facilities or at events, I'm having these conversations. I mean, as we talked a little earlier, that memo, I really talked about credible messengers and giving back. You know, and I know that, you know, my deputy commissioner, Jeff McCoy, is here. He's working on that credible messenger program. We've brought in formerly incarcerated individuals that are in the community being successful to help guide our efforts there, as well as individuals that are inside. So I think that perspective is extremely important. In terms of the phone, we are, as you alluded to, deploying Wi-Fi technology. That way, you know, we know who's controlling the phone, right? If the superintendent tells you she controls it, I probably care to disagree with her. But by putting it on the tablet, it allows you to have access to it real time, to finish the conversation that you're having real time, and to be able to have that meaningful connections. I appreciate that perspective wholesale. I do think there's a way to leverage the population to give back to one another, 100%.
Yeah.
So I guess, not that this conversation's over unless Sean's given us the hook, but what do I, from your perspective, what do I need to focus on, or what do you want me to know as being the commissioner of the agency that you think I don't know, or you think I need to know?
I won't say it's what I think you don't know, but I'll just emphasize that you have a wealth of knowledge and guys who are willing to put the effort in, and women, I should say, as well, in the prison, right? And just, I know you're leveraging that, and I know you're working on just the fact that you've come to this prison, you know, many times in your first year, and we're doing this in your first year, says a lot. So I think you get it. I just would say don't forget that you have people who are willing to help, capable, and you have, you know, you mentioned credible messengers. I was speaking to Michael Crum recently, who just was up on stage speaking about the reality that young people are more willing to listen to people who have walked in the shoes of the people who's in, you know, in the street life and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with you. And I tell you that one other thing that I think that is my responsibility, and I don't bear the only responsibility in this, but I think it's about changing the narrative. Yeah. Changing the narrative for the public, right? Oftentimes, the media only wants to report when there's disagreement or when we're at odds, and I mean odds, whether it's me and the workforce, me and the population, or anywhere in between, right? And I think that that's a disservice to the people that work for corrections and the incarcerated people that are participating in programs and changing their lives. So I've made it, you know, kind of a mission to utilize my own social media platform as a department to tell that story, and not only tell the good, right? I mean, I want to tell the good, the bad, the ugly, right? If we have things going on and we as an agency need to do better, I'm not afraid to talk about that. But for far too long, I don't think we've told the story of the positive impact that we are making and the positive changes that are going on. You know, I had an opportunity to have a conversation with the governor shortly after she signed Clean Slate into law. And, you know, there were critics that came out against Clean Slate. And I think part of that criticism is that we weren't doing or haven't been doing a good job to explain the change and the good work that's going on, when in fact Clean Slate was breaking down barriers of people to reenter society and have access to housing and education and jobs, right? And it wasn't a low bar in order to get the record sealed, but yet there were still the critics. And I think as part of changing that platform and telling the story, that's going to help societal to move forward and really embrace change in those lived experiences.
I agree. So I have one more question. Keeps with the theme of heroes that Chris brought up earlier. I have an unsung hero. It's my daughter and the children of the incarcerated, because they're the most amazing people on the planet. And I really respect you guys. And all the love goes out to y'all. You have a parent inside of prison. Know that you're loved. Don't think that because your parent is in prison, they left you out there, they don't care about you. They love you. Who is your unsung hero?
It's a tough question, but I would say my parents. I mean, I come from a family of, I'm the oldest of 6 kids. A lot of us are involved in law enforcement and particularly in corrections. But my mom, when I was born, she gave up her career. She stayed home and raised her 6 kids, and and together they instilled the values that we live by today. Strong family, strong work ethic, treating people with dignity and respect, and recognizing that people have a worth, and that we shouldn't throw away anyone. And my father in particular worked for DOCCS. He retired in 2018 as a superintendent of Coxsackie and the supervising superintendent of the Great Meadow Hub. And it's, his passion for this work is probably what got me involved in this work. I actually was talking to an incarcerated individual here today that he's actually going home on May 9th. And great. And he asked me if I was related to the superintendent at Coxsackie, and I told him it was my father, and he said he's the individual that got me out of gang life and actually put me on a trajectory that I'm on today, where he's on his way to working in social services in Troy, New York, where I happen to be born and raised. Unfortunately, well, it's ironic actually in this conversation that you asked me that question, and those are the actual people that are my heroes, in that I missed my first Beyond the Block, and the reason why is my dad passed away last year.
Sorry to hear that. So. Yeah, condolences.
Yeah, thanks.
So I just want to say, on behalf of the general population, the population of the incarcerated, formerly and presently, thank you so much, man. Really appreciate you. Really.
I want to thank you for obviously doing this today and all that you're doing, and you being a father and representing the population. And, as I usually do in all of these events, my challenge as always is, look for your own next horizon. What's your next challenge? What's your next achievement? But how are we going to change the minds of people that I can't reach and bring somebody to get to even halfway to where you are? And I think we'll be a better system and a better place.
Thank you.